Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Very excited to have this conversation today.
I'm so glad to be
Um,
here.
Thank you. All right, I wanted to kick off the conversation by mentioning this month on my sex bio, we're talking about sexual aftercare. So maybe for the people who are just joining us, we're talking today with April Davis from the Vagina blog. You can definitely
Hey.
go check them out. Thank you. At the Vagina blog, where they are actually most active on Instagram. Um, all right. So one thing that I wanted to mention is that when you get into this world of aftercare, you start learning a little bit more about that. One of the things that you actually challenge or start challenging, confronting, is that let's say dominant or most common definition of sex, which is usually just penetration. So I'd like to maybe mention this quote and we can start from there. This is a quote from Dr. Lex Brown James, marriage and family therapist. She says that sex doesn't necessarily have to end at any type of peak or orgasm or when a penis is no longer hard. Every erection doesn't have to be used either.
Yep. I totally
So
agree.
yeah, and then maybe this impacts a lot. Like this definition of sex when we are start confronting this also impacts a lot of aftercare in itself, because aftercare is a way to say, hey, sex goes beyond just when we achieve that peak, or even we don't even need to actually achieve that peak. And also it impacts solo sex, I think. I wanted to talk about a little bit about that. Like I think especially for women, solo sex can be like a huge thing to feel ashamed about, and just maybe it doesn't even feel like sex at all. So I like to ask you, like here we're talking about vulvas, vaginas, and so on. How can this translate into maybe us being able to feel more comfortable when we do this, changing our perception of solo sex, and maybe also how can we have some aftercare for ourselves to stop feeling in this weird ashamed way that we tend to feel with these things.
Yeah. These are all great topics. I think the first one is making sex. It's just calling it all sex. I was really surprised because I am constantly telling everyone, don't fake orgasms, don't fake orgasms. And the kickback that I get from some people is like, okay, but how am I supposed to end sex then? Like, if I'm not going to get there and have an orgasm, how else would I end sex other than to fake? And it's like, no.
Maybe let's talk about it before.
Yeah, and the other thing too is if you are comfortable enough with someone to be intimate with them, you should also be comfortable enough to be like, I'm good. This was fun. I'm done. I don't want to continue in, whatever we're doing, or this didn't get me there. Let's switch to something that will, if that's what you want to do. There's so many other ways to end sex other than faking an orgasm. You don't need to do that. That's not your job. That's not some requirement to have intercourse with someone or do any sort of sexual activity with someone. And so I think when we make a commitment to, I'm never faking an orgasm ever, ever again, if that's something that you do in your life, don't do it anymore. You are confirming to your partner that what they're doing is working when in reality it's not. It's also lying. It's not okay. I mean, the other thing, like,
Totally.
can you imagine if your partner was faking and how hurtful that would be if you found out? It's not a good idea. It's just not a good practice. We need to get away from that and we need to start talking about how to end sex if you're not going to have an orgasm, or how to maybe segue into, ooh, let's switch to a toy, or ooh, let's switch to this type of stimulation instead, or let's do more of this, or I'm good. Like, it's so, like, my husband and I, if we go into sexual activity and I know I'm not in the right headspace for it, I'm open to the idea, obviously, like, yeah, sure, we can totally do this. But I'm also already like doing my grocery shopping in my head, and I've got a bunch of stuff I got to get done today, and I got to do this and this and this. I'm not mentally in it. I may not get mentally in it, and I like will like give like a disclaimer of like, I want to keep moving forward with this because I'm excited you're turned on. I'm here. I'm in my head too much. I may not get into this as much as you. That doesn't mean that we can't do the things, but just know that it might be a lot harder for me to get there, or I may not get there. And he goes into it knowing that. I go into it knowing that. If everything works out, great. If it doesn't, great. There's nothing wrong with being like, high five. I gotta get on with my
Totally.
day.
Yep.
And we need to normalize that. And we need to normalize communication. I love the realization that the word intercourse means to have intercourse, as in discussion and communication with another human being. We need to start treating intercourse as if it were intercourse. And we need to broaden out how we define sex. And I love so much that I feel like the LGBTQ community has been key in doing that and helping people realize how to, ask, how to communicate, how to consent, how to, do a lot of these things and start defining sex as this instead of this one thing. Sex is all of this, right? So I think it's really important. I think it's important to shift that in our minds. I think it's important as we're teaching the next generation to talk about it in that way. And I think the more that we do that, hopefully we will see more communication and less faking of orgasms and such.
Totally. And I think part of what you're mentioning there makes me think that we also, for some reason, want to have this like just standard definition of sex, So like we are so many people in the world with so many different personalities, likes, dislikes, and then we want sex to be the same for everybody. And it's like
it's not
every single person, yeah, we all have a different thing. And then when it comes to, as you were mentioning in the conversations, I think that all needs to be talked through. I think also what you said of the disclaimer is a great idea. And I was wondering if you have like, or maybe templates you can think of as to how can you talk about these things with your partner, like a short sentences that you can say like, or even in the middle of it, because sometimes, and as you were mentioning, especially to these people that they feel they have this pressure of faking the orgasm, maybe in the middle of it, they have to do it in the middle because they couldn't do it before. What's the best way to approach it when you're in the middle of it and you still feel like, hey, it's not going to happen, but I also don't want to fake it. Maybe we can do something else. What are your thoughts there?
I think communicating that to who your partner that you're with at the time is a great idea. Like, let's switch positions. Let's try a different type of stimulation. Let's try a toy. This, for some reason, it's just not working for me today. Let's try this. But so much of this, and this is a great segue into self-pleasure, masturbation. If you know what works for you and you're familiar with your own anatomy, it's a lot easier to ask someone else to help you out, right? And so if you're unfamiliar with your own anatomy, don't know what's going to work for you, it's going to be a lot more difficult to have that talk with somebody else and be able to communicate that with someone else, right? So I think that's where, spending time with yourself and knowing yourself and your own body, why that's so important.
Totally. And then maybe what would you say to people who, because in this terms also saying we need to like expand our definition of sex, what would you say to people who feel reluctant to consider solo sex as sex? Like, how can you do, what is the advice to, hey, maybe you're reluctant, but how about you explore it? And how about, how can people walk into this world and start exploring themselves without feeling like maybe, it's wrong or it just doesn't fit?
I think it's really, really important to figure out where those feelings are coming from, right? So we kind of have to like get to the root of a lot of that. And once you get to the root, you can start working on what's causing either like the uncomfortableness or the shame or the, I don't know, we want to get to the root of what's causing that and approach that, like study that, figure that out, and then proceed forward with, okay, what am I comfortable with? And I know for some people that are like very uncomfortable with the idea of masturbation, do it with a partner. If incorporate that into your sexual experience with them. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be alone. So I know for some people, especially like even in marriages, they're like, oh, I feel like I was cheating, or if I was sexually fulfilling myself without them
Yeah.
there, or people have a lot of these mindsets, right? So my first
Yeah.
question would be, let's look at this from a curiosity standpoint. Why do you think that? Does your spouse or partner think that? Why do they think that? And you kind of have to work from there. Do you both actually agree to this, or was this something that maybe you were taught and it's just a remnant you have from like something someone said when you were a fifth grader or something? Like, I
Totally.
talk to people who still carry a lot of shame around masturbation from being taught in church classes when they were 11 years old. And then it's never a discussion they've ever had with their spouse. And then once they have that discussion, they kind of realize they're both on the same page about it, and it is something they'd like to explore more. But once again, you got to have that communication, and you have to have these conversations, because if you don't and you just keep carrying on, things don't change if things don't change, right? So you got to
Totally.
get to the root. You got to get on the same page as your partner if that's someone that you want, that's important. That if that's something that's important to you, is being on the same page as them, and then you need to figure things out. Like, for my husband and I, we had this discussion. I have no problem with him masturbating. He has no problem with me masturbating. These are things that really don't bother either of us. I've told him, like, if the wind hits you, have fun. And I'm not
Yeah.
around, And I've had someone was like, but if you like walked in on him, what would you do? And I was like, probably just like, what are we doing? How can I assist you? Do you want assistance? Do you want to be alone? Like, like,
Yeah.
and it
Need
wouldn't be
help.
weird because we'd already talked about it. So
Totally.
that's, you remove so much of the weirdness or awkwardness or uncomfortable when you just have these discussions ahead of time. And like I said, for people who are like, oh, I kind of want to dive into this, but I don't know, do it together. Have fun with it together. Bring us some new life and some curiosity into your relationship around this.
Totally. I love that. It's very much needed because I've seen that happening. Like it has happened even to me. Like when you have these things, you never talk about them just because you think they don't want to talk about it because you think they are not, like maybe no, this is too weird. Nobody wants to talk about this. And then when you
Yeah.
talk about it, it's like everyone wanted to talk about it and everyone had something to say about it, which is
Oh, yeah.
fun to see. And then maybe also talking about aftercare a little bit, maybe for those who feel like, after you do it, let's say like, okay, I did it, I masturbated, but then there is this concept. Well, it's usually more related to like, well, the post sex blues, right? Which is one of
Mm-hmm.
the reasons why aftercare is needed. But then also when we talk about solo sex, we might experience that too. The post sex blues. We might feel not that well after it. Like we might feel sad, we might feel guilty, we might feel. So maybe do you have thoughts or ideas on what could be done at that moment so that you also like rewire that whole experience for yourself and then you don't just sink into that bad feeling after actually having a good time with yourself.
I think intention is probably the biggest thing here. I know for so many people, like I said, there's that shame that's been built into this. We need to remove that. So you need to get to the roots of what's causing the shame or the guilt or anything else, whatever those negative feelings are. You need to get to the roots of what's causing that. And then, secondly, I'm a big fan of heading into something like masturbating or sexual experiences with as much intentionalness as possible. Go into it ready to give all of your attention to it. Go into it ready to like enjoy it, make it an immersive experience that is, you're planning on it. You are, because I think sometimes when we are denying that we're doing something or have negative feelings around it or we aren't intentional about it, it's just like this dirty thing that we do and we do really quick, and it's, get away from that. Make this a mindfulness practice, right? Get into it. Make it a meditation. Make it really precious self-care that you spend. It's this time that you're spending on yourself. And I think shifting your focus into like sex is good for you in every way, right? So you're doing something that's so good for you. It's calming for your nerves. It's, you're going to get this gorgeous afterglow afterwards. You start to approach it as that and as a self care practice and as something that you're doing intentionally with love for yourself, love for your partner. It's a totally different mindset than if it's this like dirty secret thing that you're not really supposed to be doing that you're ashamed of, you know?
Totally. Yeah, I love that completely. Because I think, and that happens even when you are like with partner sex, even the part of, because you mentioned it actually a couple times, a couple moments ago, when you're like you're there but you're not there. You're like doing the grocery shop list, the to-do list, or I have this to do, I have that to do. Um, and then I'm curious to ask because I've seen, well, I think that you've been more focused on the work, around learning about vulvas, vaginas, right? And then mostly, well, there is a wide spectrum, of gender identities that can have vulvas, but in general terms, I think when we talk about women, we see that happening a little bit more often. The thing of faking the orgasm, not being present in the moment, and those things. Do you have any, like, with the experience that you've had in your life? Is there any type of reasons that you have identified that this happens, and then how can people address those things and move on from there?
We've normalized it. And I don't know why it really stems so much from purity culture. We normalize this idea that for some reason women don't want sex and don't have libidos, and we're just doing this as a favor to men. So why would we care about our own pleasure anyway? Because we're just doing them a favor for their pleasure. It's a lot of the reason that sex is very intercourse centric. This even stems back to like Freud. Freud really truly believed that like penetrative sex was the ultimate and that that's all women wanted and needed was penetration. And if they couldn't orgasm from penetration, it's because they were not sexually developed enough. I mean, there's such a weird history of this weird misogyny and purity culture infringing on sexuality in humans. And so when you realize this and you realize how much we've just normalized, like when I do a poll on Instagram, I'll do Sunday survey. One of the polls that almost always comes up is who's the higher libido partner in your relationship, the female or the male? About 40% say female. And based on
Yeah,
like this societal crap that we've perpetuated, most people would assume it would be more like 5%. And those weird 5% are like sexual deviants, in some way, or they're like nymphomaniacs, or they're all, no, 40% of my audience wants sex more than their male partners or has the higher libido, the higher of a male and the female relationship. And so we've tried to normalize this whole other idea. And so I really love that we're starting to talk more about the fact that that's a myth, that's not true, that women do love and enjoy sex and crave it, and that they have libidos, and that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make them a nymphomaniac. It doesn't make them a sexual deviant. It just means that they're a human being that enjoys sexual pleasure. And I think the more that we have this conversation and we normalize, like, it's completely fine to want and enjoy sex. It's completely fine to want and enjoy masturbation. There's nothing wrong with any of these things. It's all just gorgeous stuff you can do with your amazing human body that you get to have. Like, why? Why did we ever ruin this for ourselves in the first place?
totally. I agree with that a lot. And I think another thing is like I just have this thought of like, and it also like it intersects with aftercare and also intersects with the idea that we were mentioning in the beginning of re-expanding our definition of sex,
Mm.
which is also how maybe also for women, because I do believe that, and I have seen it around me, I've experienced it myself. And also society is like they are hypocritical with this because it's also like um, okay, we want finding a woman with high sex libido is so difficult. But then when you're found, and like when they see this woman, then she's also not right. She is a slut and so on. And then
Mhm. Yep.
and then like one thing is like acknowledging that like probably we all have a part that's like that, and that's normal, and everybody, not only men. And then the other part is that also maybe for us, for women, but more than women, it depends on the type of person you are. But let's say that if you look at the overall numbers, it's mostly for women. How sex is connected to other things, connected to how much I trust you, connected to other things, and then that also
But
causes some difference.
it's connected to those same things for men too. And we don't talk about
Exactly.
that enough either. Because everyone talks about how emotional sex is for women. It's just as
Yep.
emotional for male bodies. It's just as important for them. Trust, communication, safety, just as important for someone with a male body and a male libido. And that's something else
That's
that's very
right.
frustrating to me. We are stereotyping women into this box, and we stereotype men into this box. They are horn dogs that can't control themselves. That
Yep.
is garbage, and it's extremely harmful to them, and it's even more dangerous and harmful to women. We've
Totally.
got to stop doing this to each other. It's nonsense that doesn't make any sense. We all love to have sex. Also, we're all perfectly capable of controlling ourselves. All of us.
That's, yeah,
All
human.
genitals. All
Yep.
humans.
Yep.
Because this idea that like men are just their libidos are out of control, they can't control themselves. This harms women in many different ways. First, it puts girls in a very scary situation where it's like, oh well, I did this to myself because I'm alone with a man and he raped me, but he can't control himself, so I shouldn't have put myself in this situation. I was the irresponsible one. No. Or I have to
Oh
dress
no.
extremely modestly. I have to be like so covered up. I have to be so careful. I have to be so scared of all of these things because if I allowed myself to go anywhere with a man or do anything with a man, he can't control himself. And so I have to be very this, like tight, 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 tight. Or if I dress extremely provocatively, I should get male attention, right? Men will throw themselves at me. I'll get all the male attention that I want and desire, and life will be great because I'm dressing this way. And then when it doesn't work, it's like, so do I just take off? Like, do I need to wear less clothing? What happens? I thought men can control themselves, right? So this is what we see in teenagers. Well, as these
Totally.
girls age up into adults and get into relationships and get married, one of two things happens. A, their husband rapes them, but it's fine because he can't control himself anyway, right? Or B, they find out that men are perfectly capable of controlling themselves and then blame themselves. Like, I must not be sexy enough because I thought men were crazy horn dogs that can't control themselves. And my husband is perfectly capable of controlling himself. So, what's wrong with me? It is such a
I
damaging mindset that breaks everybody, and it's a lie. There's so much mythology around sex that we've made up, and I'm done with all of it. Women like sex, men need emotional connection. We all have libidos that vary. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what genitals we have.
totally. And I think at first, I think it was a very powerful idea, the last one that you mentioned, because we usually look at it from the other perspective. But then this one of like, I might not, I have to show more because what happens? They're controlling themselves, and it's not that they're not looking at me or whatever it is. I love that because, yeah, like definitely food for thought for everybody out there. And then I think I like to close by sorry, I totally lost my train of thought.
Oh, you're
You were
fine.
saying. Oh my God. Okay. Oh, all right. Yeah. So as you were saying, yeah, we have this myth and these two boxes, right? And then I think I would like to close by asking you, what are things that you think that we should normalize, questions that we should be asking, just to acknowledge that everyone is different. So I want to know, how are you in terms of your sexuality? And then when I'm meeting you, or when I'm knowing you, and when we're getting into this space that we're going to be intimate or whatever, even before that, what are the questions that I should be asking you to know, how do you feel about sex and what do you want in sex? And that might be included or not if you have thoughts about the aftermath of it, like the aftercare of it. After that, do you need, because this is another thing, like cuddling is a big, huge need for a lot of people after sex. But then there is also the stigma that you can only cuddle with somebody you love and stuff. So those are two things there.
I'm a fan of being very picky with who you sleep with. That's and so I think go into it picky. And I exactly like the questions you were just asking. What are you into? What aren't you into? What's important to you? What are your priorities when it comes to sex? You want to get their attitude around it and what they like and what they don't like and what their priorities are, right? Those are important things. And I think it's important to talk about protection, talk about lube, talk about toys. There's so much that goes around sex. Well, how are we going to prevent pregnancy? What are we going to do if we end up pregnant?
Totally, yeah.
But I think those are discussions that people are like, oh, that's uncomfortable. Ooh, that sounds committal. Ooh, that yeah, these are things you should be talking about with your sexual partners. This is a very intimate act.
Totally,
You
yeah,
should be
that's true.
comfortable asking them these questions before you let them
That's
in
true.
you.
Yep,
And so I
yep,
think it's important to get comfortable saying things like vulva, penis, protection, pregnancy. Don't be scared of those words.
yeah. It's part of life. It can happen, as you
Oh
could
yeah,
just, anything else can happen. It's normal. Yep.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, April, for joining us today. For everybody, we just chatted with April Davis from the Vagina Blog. You can go check them out at the Vagina Blog, where they're most active.
Mm-hmm.
See you. Well, I'm very excited, hoping we can talk more in the future. And well, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. You have a wonderful weekend, and see you next week with another IG Live.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, April. Take care. Nice talking.